Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Good Sunday, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service. It's the 14th of September. We always encourage you to check out our website or your NOAA Weather Radio for your latest weather information, no matter what part of Alaska you're in. Head to weather.gov/Alaska if you're on your cell device or your mobile device. A lot of the time it'll work really well. Looks like many areas also have kind of a streamlined appearance there on your mobile device. So all the information is there, just like if you're sitting in front of a computer. Check that out if you haven't. The weather info line's open at 800-472-0391. Find information during the day on Twitter. NWS Alaska is a great start. NWS Anchorage, NWS Fairbanks, and NWS Juneau all tweeting out information during the day. On Facebook, of course, another great way to find information, also at NWS Alaska for the entire state. And on YouTube at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, you'll get a quick afternoon map briefing there of what's going on all the way around the state. And then following this broadcast on our broadcast partners site, alaskapublic.org, and on AKwx TV on YouTube, you'll be able to see the entire broadcast of Alaska Weather following this a little bit later in the evening. So if you miss a piece, you want to go back and watch your favorite part over and over and over again, or share it with your friends, you can do that on YouTube or any of those social media channels. Now, tonight's hazardous weather includes a small stream flood advisory for the Susitna Valley. That'll go until at least Monday. A lot of rainfall has been moving across South Central in the last 48 hours, and we'll have some of those numbers for you here in a minute, but certainly some impressive totals for many in Prince William Sound and also in the Susitna Valley. So be wary of small streams and some of the larger rivers there, as some of those levels could be coming up or maybe blocking a few of your favorite roads out to your hunting grounds. The Deltana and Tanana Flats region is still looking at a wind advisory that'll go through tomorrow. Gusts upwards of 50 miles an hour will continue, and that's all a part of the larger weather puzzle that is helping the middle Tanana Valley to be just scorching hot today. Temperature as of 4 o'clock was 76 degrees. It's not a mistake, 76. Thanks to the downsloping wind coming off the north side of the Alaska Range. Delta Junction was also 70, and many of the surrounding communities were abnormally warm. What is normal for this time of the year? About 56 degrees, I believe, for Fairbanks, which is, again, that's pretty impressive when you compare it to 76 degrees. Annette in southeastern Alaska, a little bit of a different reason they're so warm. Under a ridge of high pressure and plenty of sunshine. That ridge extends all the way up the west coast of the United States, really all the way down into Mexico. And they're tying a high temperature of 72. The last time that was set, I believe, was actually that number was set back in 2013 for Annette, but Fairbanks, the record was back to 1938, I think. So that's been a long time since it's been this warm on at least this date in September. Now to Titlik in Prince William Sound. It's very close to the Valdez area, just on the arm of Valdez. 9 inches of rain in about 2 days' time. That is a tremendous amount of water. Of course, Prince William Sound, one of the wettest places on the planet. That whole region there from Valdez eastward toward the Wrangell St. Elias, probably one of the wettest spots, certainly in North America and maybe even parts of the world. You can always check those kind of stats and the numbers there, the record heat included. If you go to weather.gov/Alaska, if you like to check the stuff out and kind of interrogate it, see what's average for today, see what the records are for today. If you go over to climate stats, it'll be on the left-hand side of your screen. Look for the AK Interactive Climate Database there. Click that, and then you can click on a lot of spots all the way around Alaska. Check records, check the actual recorded weather that we've seen today, as well as what might be normal or average for this date in history. All right, on to the forecast now. You're looking at the Bering Sea and, of course, the North Pacific. A wide stream of moisture moving across the west and the North Pacific, all wrapping into low pressure that's now found its way into the south and western sections of Alaska. By it moving a little bit further eastward, it's allowing some colder air to drop southward now across the western Bering Sea. So it'll be interesting to see over the next couple days how that changes the weather picture out across the Bering, but slowly some things are starting to mix in some colder air from the north. In the meantime, that plume of moisture all the way across the Pacific is still headed toward the Gulf of Alaska, and with that you can see the bands of moisture stretching all the way from the south to north into the Arctic, covering up the coastal plain now with clouds. And as that warm and wet air is coming over some of that cold water, there certainly is an opportunity for some light rain and drizzle and fog in those areas. However, keep your eye on this region right here around the middle Tanana Valley, including Fairbanks. See this big hole? Watch as that develops. That's air racing right over the Alaska range, and watch that just clear up right across the middle Tanana Valley. I'll be quiet. You can just, yeah, see that? That sunshine and the wind moving right over the range today. Wow, 76 degrees. That is how you do that there in Fairbanks in September. Enjoy that, because it's just a guess, kind of a long shot, but I'm guessing February is not going to look like that, at least not with the heat. So sorry, I didn't want to bring that up too soon. I know it's almost winter, but it's not. So hopefully the middle Tanana Valley and everybody there enjoyed the day today. Out across southwest, you can see that broad southeasterly flow racing up the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta and over Bristol Bay. That upper level low is stacked all the way from the top down to the bottom. And it's still a pretty decent weather maker. It's been bringing rain and wind across the Barren Islands, south central, all the way through the lower and middle Yukon Valley, pushing clouds up into Kotzebue and across Seward Peninsula today. Certainly some hefty rainfall totals across the Alaska Peninsula as well. Places like False Pass and Cold Bay just got soaked in the last couple days. And now this moisture stream, the one that's been aimed at Prince William Sound, is sliding eastward a little bit more, and it's starting to become a little more ragged. But notice, southeast is still high and dry. High pressure is still in charge of this region, right around Annette. Again, temperatures tied that record high there in the low 70s, thanks to sunshine, dry weather, and beautiful weather, really. It looks like all probably up toward Petersburg and even Juneau today. So great weather for southeast. Here's the weather map. When you put the lows on it, you can see a 984 millibar low just west of Bristol Bay. That wave of low pressure over the Alaska Range and just north, drawing a lot of wind northward. Here's our frontal boundary across the Brooks Range, and that has trapped some of the colder air now across the coastal plain, areas of fog and a little bit of drizzle there. Most of the heavier rainfall, though, has been confined to southern coastal areas. And we're not done. As we go through the next couple days, there will still be an opportunity for probably 3 to 5 inches of rain across a broad area from northern sections of the Gulf of Alaska, and especially Prince William Sound, Kodiak, and then probably 1 to 3 inches across south and western Alaska and some of the Alaska Peninsula coastal areas. So by no means is this weather pattern going to dry up in the next couple days. As you see, that boundary sitting between, let's say, pretty much the wetter side of the Gulf of Alaska and southeast. So with southeast at 1,014 millibars of high pressure southwest of Haida Gwaii, you are still in prime position for a clear and dry night for most areas. Periods of moderate to occasionally heavy rain around Bristol Bay and Kodiak and maybe south central Alaska, a little bit more showery in nature than anything else. Showers across Kotzebue Sound and the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta toward Norton Sound. And here's another wave of low pressure working across the Aleutians. That will quickly move eastward toward Dutch Harbor and Unalaska by Monday. Does not look to be a very strong weather maker. It may be breezy and switch the winds around from time to time, but it doesn't look like it's anything compared to what just went through. A 998 millibar low there just off of Imanak, and weak waves of low pressure wrapping around this high pressure. Still in command of southeast as we head into Monday afternoon. Rain probably working into Sitka and Gustavus and Juneau, Haines and Skagway, and some light rain and drizzle for the Arctic coast. Frontal boundary hasn't moved there, and showers and thunderstorms, as we've seen in small pockets for the last couple days in the west, might be able to develop across the eastern interior as we get into Monday afternoon. So if you're flying tomorrow and you see relatively bubbly air out there, with the cumulus clouds developing, you might want to keep in mind that lightning might be a possibility as we get into the afternoon. By Tuesday, that threat pretty much vanishes. It will still be an energetic system, but most of that lift, the sunshine and the heat in place, and the upper level dynamics will probably dissipate somewhat. By Tuesday, 994 millibar low still sitting north of the Alaska Peninsula and west of Bristol Bay, east of the Pribilofs here. And here comes another surge of moisture and wind trying to work its way in from the North Pacific. High pressure shifted northward now, but because it's done so, it's allowed some moisture to kind of slosh over in the north and east side. Now, southeastern Alaska, you'll start to see a better chance for some showers as we get into the midweek. Look, it's still raining in south central and southwestern Alaska. The interior will probably see more clouds than anything else. There's still some showers lingering around. The Arctic coast looking at more clouds than anything, probably fog as well. Showers for the Brooks Range and areas near Nome and probably the Noatak and Kobuk valleys, as well as AKwx. And then out across the Bering Sea, a few showers there from time to time. The wind's picking up from the north, west of the St. Matthew Island waters all the way up through the Bering Strait. Temperatures today have made it into the mid-50s for southeast, south central, mid to upper 50s, even Prince William Sound after a soaker today, 59 around Talkeetna and 74 around Fairbanks. That was earlier. 64 around Eagle. Northward, 46 in Arctic Village, 30s for the Arctic coast. Wainwright was 49, Shishmaref 52. Nome was 59 degrees as well. The Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta all the way from Mamaroneck down toward Bethel and into Bristol Bay was in the mid-50s today. Looked like Savunga was about 46. Bristol Bay saw temps in the mid to upper 50s, even closer to 60 degrees for some. False Pass, Cold Bay, and Sandpoint in the lower to mid-50s. The Pribilofs were in the mid-50s. On Alaska and Dutch Harbor, 52, and Adak and Atka in the lower 50s this afternoon. Lower 50s for the Alaska Peninsula tonight. Looks like King Salmon will be closer to 49. Bethel about 47, Nome 46, Fairbanks 48, 34 around Barrow. South central temperatures could drop below 50 degrees later tonight. And southeast, upper 40s and lower 50s for you. Yakutat a low of 50 with a high of 57 tomorrow. Juneau closing in on 60. Some areas in southern southeast like Annette and Ketchikan, maybe even Craig in the upper 60s tomorrow. Another beautiful day for you. South central, including Prince William Sound, lower to mid 50s. Kodiak 68, nearly 70 in Fairbanks. And if the wind kicks in, it could go even higher as we've seen today. 55 in Arctic Village, 56 in Nome. Kotzebue looking at temps in the mid-50s tomorrow. Bristol Bay closer to 60. The Alaska Peninsula upper 50s with St. Paul at 54. Flying weather shows a wide swath of IFR from Barrow out toward Kaktovik and north and east. West of the Bering Strait and south, you'll look at St. Lawrence Island there. IFR conditions are expected. We'll watch for towering cumulus and maybe some thunderstorms across the eastern interior, perhaps a little bit closer to the Copper River Basin as well. The western Alaska Range during the day could be looking at IFR and also areas just south of the Aleutian Chain and west of Nikolsky. Here's your past conditions then for your Monday. Anaktuvik and Adigan Pass are expected to be MVFR. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass we expect to stay IFR through most of the day. Rainy Pass, MVFR conditions. Windy Pass likely seeing some improvement during your day. Isabel should also see similar improvements toward VFR. Mentasta Pass we expect to see visual flight rules. Some improvements after a morning start of MVFR for Tanita Pass. Portage Pass we expect to see MVFR, especially on the east side. Maybe some improvements on the west side. And Chilkoot and White Pass, with more moisture moving in, will probably hold that at MVFR. Freezing levels show a shift of that hotter air moving eastward, and with that, colder air is trying to win the day, dropping southward a little bit more toward the Gulf of Anadyr with levels as low as 2,000 feet. The Arctic coast still looking at as high as 6,000 to 8,000 feet freezing levels, so that warm air is still in charge of your neck of the woods with a little bit more of a sharper contrast there across the Aleutians from 6,000 to 10,000 feet. Icing potential is still there. We've had a lot of reports of icing from pilots like you, and thank you for issuing those PIREPs. We certainly appreciate that, and that helps all of the pilots around Alaska have a better weather forecast from the Alaska Aviation Weather Unit. Above 10,000 feet across southeast, you might find an opportunity for some occasional moderate icing. We'll watch for towering cumulus, of course. And above 10,000 feet, a broad area in southern and western Alaska, maybe some spots there that could reach occasional moderate, and also across the southern and northern Bering Sea, some hot spots there for icing potential, all of that pretty high up there above 10,000 feet. The jet stream shows that broad area of low pressure now. Instead of being a very concentrated ball of energy, it's kind of expanding once again. We've got another trough of low pressure dropping south of the Kamchatka Peninsula, and this is impressive too. The wave of low pressure in the upper atmosphere that drops as far south as Southern California is pulling in some of that colder storm energy. So we'll see what happens with this storm system as we go ahead in time this week. Now also, a lot of cold air still dropping southward into the lower 48. So if you want to just kind of jab your friends a little bit and say, Alaska's sure nice this time of the year. How's your weather doing? They probably enjoy that, so make sure you send them an email if you can. 9,000 feet across the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta. That low is stacked up and down, and at 9,000 feet you can see that broad circulation again, still sweeping in winds from about 15 to 20 knots across the Aleutians. Southwesterlies moving into southeastern Alaska. The interior looking at pretty light winds at this level. Remember, they are racing over the Deltana and Tanana Flats region. around 50 miles per hour, and a much faster flow just south of the chain at 60 knots. You see that at 50 knots there at 3,000 feet. Southwesterlies coming into the Bristol Bay region, 10 to 20 knots. Light winds coming across the Prince William Sound region, only around 10 knots or so, and kind of a light variable flow across the Panhandle, and easterlies moving across the Brooks Range from about 5 to 10 knots or so. So all in all, winds aren't too bad at 3,000 feet. Turbulence potential then, we still see some hot spots out across southwestern Alaska, and just like today, there's probably going to be some patches of isolated severe. Really hard to pin that down just yet. But be careful out across southwestern Alaska tomorrow. We'll watch for those towering cumulus. That always implies localized turbulence issues, and below 2,000 feet across the Arctic coast and across the central and eastern chain, generally below 4,000 feet there. So fly safe for your Monday and watch for improvements in the weather perhaps later on in the week, but things are still pretty unsettled as it is, well, fall, I guess, around Alaska. We'll take a look at your marine weather forecast and have a peek at the sea ice edge here in just a few minutes. Stay with us.
The landing procedure has to be changed a bit on a circling approach because you'll probably have to level off for a short while as you maneuver the airplane onto the final approach. Once again, practice is the key. Learn the power setting required to maintain level flight in the approach configuration while you circle, then reduce power or use the wing flaps as necessary to complete the landing. Remember, the rules require that you remain at MDA until it's necessary to descend for a landing.
Maneuvering at MDA is always hazardous, and the circling approach presents a unique problem for single-pilot IFR operations. You must keep the runway in sight as you circle, and with no one to help, that's a pretty tough job in a low-visibility situation that requires almost constant reference to the flight instruments. Regardless of the circumstances, whenever you sense a conflict between maintaining visual contact and aircraft control, go around. Don't hesitate. Don't fight it. Go on the gauges, roll the wings level, and climb. You can always come back for another try. The circling approach in low visibility is an ideal environment for visual illusions and total spatial disorientation, and it's even worse at night. You might consider raising your personal visibility minimums for circling approaches. By the way, have you picked up the runway?
Piper 59er, New York approach. Turn right, heading 220. Radar vectors to the localizer, ILS runway 23 approach, Morristown.
Okay, right turn heading 220, intercept the localizer, Morristown, 599er.
Here comes the localizer. Looks like the controller is going to fly the pilot right through it.
Piper 59er, looks like we took you through the localizer there. Turn left heading 190, radar vectors back to the localizer.
Okay, I think I can make that left to 190 for 599er.
That's going to be some steep turn. This pilot is going to have to roll into a steep bank. Turn back to the right. Too much. Come back to the left. Here comes the glide slope. Turn right. Too much. Below the glide slope. Pull up. Pull up.
Okay, let's hold it right there. Events like this can be avoided by situational awareness. In the example, the movement of the localizer needle but no clearance for the approach was a clue that the controller was not on top of the situation. A query, a gentle reminder at this point may have made a big difference. After the oversight was noticed, the controller requested a large heading change, and the pilot suckered himself into a steep turn, almost always a bad deal on instruments, especially on approach, and especially when there's only one instrument pilot on board. Things got progressively worse, and if we hadn't stopped the world at that point, there probably would have been an accident. Here's how it might have gone.
Piper 59er, looks like we took you through the localizer there. Turn left heading 190, radar vectors back to the localizer.
Okay, 599. I think you got us in a little bit close. Could you give us another re-intercept?
Piper 599er, sorry about that. Turn right heading 300, climb and maintain 2000. This will be radar vectors to sequence you for another approach.
Okay, right turn heading 360.
When you recognize an extremely high workload situation shaping up, one that might put you in over your head, avoid it. But if you find yourself in the middle of one, do whatever you think is necessary to get out. And above all else, remember aviation's rule number 1. Fly the airplane.
Single pilot IFR operations account for a significant part of general aviation's activity. It's just another way that pilots can make their aircraft more useful and efficient. But nothing is free, and as we've pointed out in this program, there are some problems to be overcome. At the top of the list is workload, doing everything that has to be done and doing it in a timely manner. The single pilot on instruments is sometimes faced with a monstrous workload, but by planning ahead, even the least experienced IFR pilot can cope. Of course, planning ahead includes recognizing a situation with the potential of getting out of hand and exercising a well-planned alternate course of action. Single pilot IFR has been a safe way to fly for a long time, and it can continue to provide a lot of satisfaction and utility for general aviation pilots who are willing to pay the price of admission, training, self-discipline, and planning ahead.
Time for an update of the sea ice edge. You can always find this by going to weather.gov/anchorage/ice.php, which takes you to the Alaska Sea Ice Program. The ice is still about 80, maybe 70 nautical miles now north and east of Kaktovik and about 100 nautical miles northeast of Barrow. There's been chunks of brash ice that have been breaking off and moving from east to west on that fast east to westerly flow. It's been running around 25 to 30, maybe 35 knots at times. A lot of that will melt as it breaks off, so we're not expecting any coastal issues with that at this time. Here's a look at southeast. Now, winds are going to be pretty light across the inner waterways, 10 to about 15 knots of southwesterly flow through Stevens Passage and Frederick Sound with a 2-foot sea. Southerlies across the Lynn Canal between 10 and 15 knots with a 3-foot sea, and northwesterlies remain light across the Clarence Strait. Coastal waters will be looking at winds coming out of the south and southeast, pretty much parallel to the coast, about 10 to as high as 25 knots up around Yakutat with an 11-foot sea. That diminishes to 10 knots there as we get into Tuesday. And you'll see the flow reverse course from Sitka southward toward the Dixon entrance, about 10 knots with an 8-foot sea. The inner waterways pretty much remain unchanged as we get into Tuesday. Now across south central, look for some stronger winds across the Prince William Sound region, 25 knots with a 5-foot sea, 9-foot seas on the outside, 8 to 9-foot seas across the western Gulf. Coming into the western areas around the Barren Islands, look for an easterly flow with a 5-foot sea. 11-foot seas there east of Kodiak, and northeasterlies coming down Cook Inlet at 20 knots. That will become a little more variable on Tuesday with the southerly flow developing 10 to 15, even 20 knots west of the Barrens. The western Gulf looking at 10 to as high as 20 knots with 6-foot seas east of Kodiak, and 15-knot winds inside and outside of Prince William Sound, 3-foot seas on the inside and 6-foot seas on the outside. Across the Alaska Peninsula, a westerly wind racing across there. That is slowing down, though, a lot better than the last couple days. 25 to 30 knots there with the highest south of Castle Cape and east of Chignik with a 13-foot sea. Becoming southeasterly on Tuesday, 15 knots with a 6-foot sea and lighter winds coming off the peninsula. Around Bristol Bay, that's southeast at 10 knots with a 3-foot sea, more of a variable flow as you go down the Bering Sea coast. Across the Aleutians, a south and westerly wind north of Nikolsky and north of Atka, 20 knots or so, 25 knots coming in Nikolsky, more of a westerly flow north of Unalaska. Around Attu and Kiska, expect a 25-knot wind, 7-foot seas out in the west on Tuesday. The winds switch around to more of an east and northeasterly flow, so between Monday afternoon and Tuesday morning, you'll see those winds turning. 20 to 25 knots with 5 to 6 foot seas there. Light and variable winds south of Atka and then back into that northwesterly flow as you hit Unalaska. On either side, 15 to 20 knots with a 4 to 7 foot sea. The west coast looking at northeasterly winds developing there around St. Lawrence Island and west of Ammonok. Northerly flow around St. Matthew and westerlies coming across the Pribilofs into the Kuskokwim Bay at 6-foot seas with 25 knots coming in. Becoming southerly on Tuesday. Variable flow and light around Hooper Bay and north of Makoriak, and northerly flow coming across St. Lawrence Island with variable and light winds around the Pribilofs. On the inside, the water should be about 3 feet or so. The Arctic coast, easterlies coming across the Beaufort Sea coast, 30 knots with a 10-foot sea. The winds still running parallel to the coast for the Chukchi, 20 to 25 knots, and 4-foot seas outside of Kotzebue Sound. By Tuesday, very little change. We'll see a few areas shifting to more of a northeasterly wind there around Wainwright and Point Barrow, 15 to 20 knots, and the winds diminish across the Beaufort Sea coast as well, down to 15 and 20 knots on Tuesday. Recapping the weather picture, high pressure still in charge of most of southeast. You still have some pleasant days ahead of you and relatively dry weather, especially from Sitka to about Petersburg and southward. Northward, a better chance of seeing some showers and more clouds as we get into the week. Periods of occasionally moderate to heavy rain for the southern coastal areas and including the western coastal areas. Some areas by midweek could still see another 2, maybe 4, occasionally 5 inches of rain. The interior should be dry tonight for most areas around the middle Tanana, though clouds will be returning. There's an opportunity for some convection across the eastern interior tomorrow. Showers and unsettled weather for the Bering Sea, especially the west coast, the Seward Peninsula with showers there in areas of low clouds and fog and probably drizzle developing on Monday. Some of that will likely break up a bit more on Tuesday with the easterly flow continuing there. That's your Alaska weather. Thanks.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Indie Alaska is an innovative weekly web series capturing the diverse and colorful lifestyle of Alaskans. Real stories of everyday Alaskans at work and play. Supported in part by Alyeska Pipeline Service Company.